If you were to guess how many times you've procrastinated within the last day, within the last week, within the last month, within the last year, would you be happy with yourself? Would you be happy with the amount of productivity that you've gained from that amount of procrastination? If the answer is probably not, then this video is the one for you, because as a chronic procrastinator in high school, I'm talking I would wake up literally 2 hours before my 7 a.m. calculus test to study at 5 a.m. for it. Enough of that, but there's no more of that. I will tell you guys my story and how I incorporated these strategies, but the strategies themselves are science-backed. And the reason why is because in high school, everything I was searching up related to how to stop procrastinating was people's personal anecdotes. Oh, my teacher helped me stop procrastinating. I don't have your teacher. How am I supposed to know what your teacher said? So in this video, those 3 steps that I'm going to be telling you are backed not just by me, but by science and psychology, because that's how you're going to see a difference in the amount of work that you get done and the speed at which you get done with it. So without further ado, keep watching for so much more. So because procrastination is something that literally affects our levels of dopamine, step number 1 is to start controlling your thoughts around procrastinating. Scientific and psychological proof indicates that you can procrastinate for a wide variety of factors, but the common theme between all of those factors, procrastination is almost a self-defense technique. Just think about it. You're procrastinating on studying for that test. Why? Not because you don't want to do well on that test, because even when you procrastinate, by the time you actually get to studying, you're going to study your heart out. You know that. So it's not for that reason, but rather you're procrastinating because you don't want to disappoint yourself, or you're distracted, or there are other things on that priorities list that you just haven't prioritized yet, so you don't know what to achieve first, and because that's stressing you out, you just keep procrastinating and it becomes a cycle. In a video that I watched recently, Andrew Huberman, who is a scientist, explained this concept really well. He said that when you procrastinate, you're naturally in the state of low dopamine because of the fact that you're procrastinating and you recognize that. That's your short-term thinking. When you're like, I'm procrastinating, so I'm not gonna do it. I'm procrastinating, so I'm a failure. I'm procrastinating, so what am I doing with my life? Those are all examples of negative self-talk. When I say control your thoughts, it means that you have to get out of that state of low dopamine by engaging in a task that Andrew Huberman describes is harder, because once you get into that task, the reward and the levels of dopamine that are associated with that word just get so much higher. In other words, all this means your short-term thoughts about procrastinating, where you're in this lump and just constant negative self-talk, that can start becoming resolved if you just think about the long-term implications. Because when you're so in your head about these thoughts, it's only going to leave you in more of a negative place than if you think about what not procrastinating would do for your future self. One thing that I will say for me personally, future self is always at the back of my mind. Whenever I'm doing something that's hard, it's always there. It's been transformative for me because in high school, I never did that. When I was procrastinating on college apps, I wasn't thinking about myself in college. I was thinking about myself in the present moment and how I hated writing college essays, or I hated doing this, and it was just too tedious, too much time, so I would procrastinate. My negative self-talk, it was inhibiting me rather than propelling me forward. But I could have just controlled those thoughts by just making the choice between, do I want to procrastinate on this, or do I at least just want to start? You don't have to think of the tasks as, oh, they're gonna be fun, and that'll stop you from procrastinating, because the odds are it probably won't. But instead, what will is seeing what engaging in that task will do for you in the future. I'm sure you've heard people saying, oh, like that's a problem for future me. Like, no, that mindset itself is problematic. Control each choice that you're making. Studies show that once you engage in a task for just 5 minutes, you are way more likely to stay focused in that task. That hump of starting is always the most difficult to get through. So you have to get through that first before you do anything else. Once you have that mastered, you're able to continue on to the more practical steps that are actual growth and changing your habits. And that all leads me to the second step. If you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, you know that the author talks about getting 1% better every day, and that applies here too. Step number 2 is to overcome procrastination and force yourself to focus by planning that time to focus in advance. That makes all the difference. That makes all the difference. I could just name drop Google Calendar and leave this step just at that, just as Google Calendar, but no, I need to explain. Reason why Google Calendar helped me was because I was never a planner in high school. I didn't care enough to put in dedicated time blocks of studying each and every day, finding a study spot, the same study spot, and go to that in the allotted time blocks. I never cared to do that in high school. In college, that all changed for me when I started using Google Calendar and seeing everything that I had to do all laid out for me right there that allowed me two things. Number one, I got to see when it was that I actually got to study. A lot of the time in high school, my procrastination wouldn't necessarily result from my intrinsic thinking. It would result from extenuating factors. I wasn't able to study 2 days before my test because I would have practice or I would have work or something. I just didn't realize that until I was studying the day before, and I was like, shoot, like I had work yesterday, but I could have studied the day before if I had known how hard studying for this test was actually gonna be. Once you actually see that laid out for you, it becomes significantly easier to find times that work. And the second thing this allows you to do is build discipline. Atomic Habits explains that when you do things and when you build habits just 1% better every day, you're creating systems for yourself instead of just relying on your impulses. And when you decide to study pretty last minute, it's an impulse usually. There are so many studies that also support this. People know that once they plan in advance, life just gets easier for them, and you're gonna stop procrastinating because you have no other choice but to start procrastinating. The saying procrastination is the thief of time is automatically refuted with this step alone. When you give yourself time in advance by just planning out certain days that you know you're going to be free in the week to study, that's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. You're giving yourself time. Procrastination isn't even going to be in the picture to be the thief of time because you are the giver of time, which finally leads me into step number 3. Perhaps the most important one. It also relates to a fundamental reason that procrastination happens. Breaking things down into smaller tasks is such a simple yet effective but still overlooked practice that will stop your procrastination almost immediately. Say you have a big project due, you're procrastinating on it because you're intimidated by how big that project is. Guess what? If you are able to work on tasks of that project, just break them up piece by piece, at least 2-3 weeks in advance, it's just gonna get that much easier to see that you're making progress on the project. And that in itself is a reward to you. If you save all of your project up until the day before it's due, there's a lot of negative self-talk, right? You don't believe in yourself, and that could also be a video of, honestly, that is gonna be a video of its own, not to foreshadow. Anyways, and third, practically speaking, you probably aren't gonna do good on that project. Like, let's be real. There are ways to break things up into smaller tasks. You won't just assign things, I'll do the introduction this day, I'll do the actual research this day, and then I'll form the conclusion and hypothesis, whatever. You allocate it by the actual pieces of the project. In a way, you're also inhibiting yourself because you're making it uneven. Whereas if you use the Pomodoro technique and you're working for 25 minutes or 30 minutes at a time, and then you take a 5-minute break, you're gonna be doing even amounts of work. Say that you do that 4 times, right, within a day, and you're gonna be getting 2 hours of work done. Who knows how many pieces of the project that you could accomplish in those 2 hours. Maybe you'll get the intro, hypothesis, and research all in the same day just by breaking it down into 30-minute increments. One other personal example to insert here that is backed by scientific evidence, but the way I studied for my accounting final this semester was in a way that I have never seen myself study before, because I broke it up into small increments of studying each day for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, guys. And guess what? I ended up getting the grade on the test that I needed to get an A in the class. AP Physics test, junior year. Great example. I got a 3 on the AP Physics test, which if you go to a public college, you would also get credit for a 3. The way that I studied for that test was I studied by topic. Because I was studying only 2 or 3 days in advance of that test, I was studying units. What unit tests did I do the worst on? And I would study for those units first. But then the questions that ended up being hard for me on the actual AP test were the questions that I didn't study for, questions that were supposedly part of those easier units. And the reason why is because I barely studied those easier units. Whereas if I had used time wisely, for example, I used the Pomodoro method to study for AP Physics, what I would have done differently, 20 minutes of hard studying, meaning that I would study for those harder units in 20 minutes, but then 10 minutes, the remaining 10 minutes of the 30-minute increment, I would study for the easier topics. If you've made it all the way up until this point of the video, I think it's pretty safe to assume that you are actively trying to work on getting better at studying, getting better at working. This is probably the only video you'll actually need to start seeing action happen. So just incorporate these strategies once school starts back up, once your job starts back up. It's so important to understand to stop being harsh on yourself for procrastination. You making it to the end of this video tells me enough. You're gonna beat procrastination. Like, don't even worry, don't trip about it. It's all a habit. Once these all start building up, you're gonna see profound changes. You probably don't even realize it. You probably expect procrastination to happen the next time you have a test. It's never too late to break that and just start over. Just start forming habits, start forming systems that will fundamentally change the way that you think about procrastination. If this helped, please give this a like, share this with your friends, and subscribe, because I have so much more content coming your way on YouTube. I already have a TikTok where I post short videos about this, which you should definitely go check out. So thank y'all so much for watching. I hope you guys have the most wonderful new year ahead of you. Make sure to stay subscribed for more content like this, because 2024, if you want it to be your year, this channel is the right place for you. So thank y'all so much, and see you next time.